The handcuffs bit into Elena Martinez's wrists as she stood on the courthouse steps, the cold metal a sharp contrast to the fire in her chest. She didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't beg, even when the crowd's whispers grew louder, their stares heavier. She'd known this moment might come, but nothing could have prepared her for the woman standing before her, badge gleaming, eyes like a storm about to break. Officer Sarah Coleman's grip on Elena's arm was firm, professional, but her fingers trembled just enough to betray her. The late afternoon sun painted the Atlanta skyline in shades of amber and crimson, and the air carried the weight of a city holding its breath. Elena, 28, a paralegal with a reputation for fighting tooth and nail for her clients, had just walked out of a courtroom where she'd won a case that made headlines. A landmark challenge to a local ordinance banning public displays of same-sex affection. The law was struck down, and Elena had been the one to swing the gavel, metaphorically speaking, through months of research, late nights, and unrelenting passion. But now, here she was, cuffed like a criminal outside the very courthouse where she'd claimed victory. The irony wasn't lost on her. Sarah, 34, the officer tasked with her arrest, stood tall in her pressed uniform, her blonde hair tucked neatly beneath her cap. Her face was a mask of duty, but her blue eyes flickered with something Elena couldn't quite place: guilt, maybe, or something softer, more dangerous. "You're making a mistake," Elena said, her voice low but steady, cutting through the hum of the gathering crowd. "You know why I was in there today." Sarah's jaw tightened, and she avoided Elena's gaze, focusing instead on the police car parked at the curb. "You were causing a disturbance," she said, her tone clipped, rehearsed. "Kissing another woman in public right after a case like that? You're practically begging for trouble." Elena's lips curved into a bitter smile. "Trouble? Or just living my truth?" She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You're arresting me for the very thing I just proved isn't a crime." Sarah's hand faltered on Elena's arm, but she didn't respond. The crowd murmured, phones raised to capture the scene. Elena could feel the weight of their judgment, but it was Sarah's silence that stung the most. She'd seen that look before on colleagues, on strangers, on her own family when she came out at 19. It was the look of someone torn between what they were taught and what they felt. And Elena, despite the cuffs, despite the bruise blooming on her cheek from an earlier scuffle, felt a spark of something reckless. She wanted to crack that facade to see what lay beneath. The story of how they got here wasn't simple. It began 3 months ago, in a dive bar on the edge of town, where Elena had been celebrating a small victory with her team. She'd noticed Sarah then, off duty, nursing a beer in the corner, her eyes lingering on Elena's laugh a little too long. They'd talked briefly, awkwardly about nothing important. The Braves' losing streak, the humidity, the way the jukebox kept skipping. But there was a charge between them, a pull Elena couldn't ignore, even if Sarah had left abruptly, muttering about an early shift. They crossed paths again a week later, at a community forum on the ordinance Elena was fighting. Sarah was there in uniform, stationed at the back, her face unreadable as Elena spoke passionately about love, freedom, and the right to exist without fear. Their eyes met across the room, and Elena felt it again, that unspoken something. She didn't know then that Sarah was struggling, that she'd grown up in a house where words like sin and shame were thrown around like weapons, that she buried her own feelings so deep they barely had a name. Now, as Sarah guided her toward the police car, Elena's mind raced. She'd kissed her girlfriend Mia on the courthouse steps, a deliberate act of defiance after the ruling. It was a moment of joy, of triumph, until a bystander, emboldened by the city's lingering prejudices, had shoved her, sparking a shouting match. Sarah had been nearby, called to the scene, and now here they were, caught in a dance neither had choreographed. "You don't have to do this," Elena said, her voice softer now, searching Sarah's face. "You know this isn't right." Sarah's eyes flicked to hers, and for a moment the mask slipped. There was pain there, raw and unguarded. "I'm doing my job," she said, but the words sounded hollow, like she was trying to convince herself. The car door opened and Elena slid inside, her heart pounding. She wasn't afraid of the arrest, she'd been through worse. But Sarah's conflict, the way her hand lingered on the door, the way her breath hitched as their eyes met, in it stirred something in Elena. This wasn't just about a law or a case. This was about two people standing on opposite sides of a line, each daring the other to cross it. As the car pulled away, Elena leaned her head back, closing her eyes. She thought of Mia, of the fight they'd won, of the battles still ahead. And she thought of Sarah, the woman who'd just arrested her, who didn't know that by doing so, she'd violated the very law she was meant to uphold, a law that no longer existed, thanks to Elena. The irony was almost poetic, but it was the possibility of what came next that kept Elena's heart racing. She wasn't done with Sarah Coleman. Not by a long shot. The police station was a fluorescent-lit maze of chaos and paperwork, but Elena sat calmly in the holding cell, her hands no longer cuffed but her wrists still red from the metal. She leaned against the cold concrete wall, her mind replaying the scene on the courthouse steps. Mia's lips on hers, the crowd's gasps, the bystanders' shove, and then Sarah, always Sarah, with her conflicted eyes and trembling hands. Elena didn't know why she couldn't shake the image of the officer, but it clung to her like the humidity of an Atlanta summer. Sarah, meanwhile, was at her desk, staring at the arrest report she hadn't yet filed. The words blurred together. Disorderly conduct, public disturbance. They felt wrong, like a lie she was forcing herself to tell. She'd seen the court ruling on the news, knew the ordinance was dead, yet she'd acted on instinct, on the orders of a sergeant who didn't care about nuances. Arresting Elena had been a reflex, a way to maintain order in a moment that felt like it was slipping away. But now, in the quiet of the station, doubt gnawed at her. She glanced at the holding cell, visible through a glass window. Elena was sitting there, her dark hair falling loose from its ponytail, her posture defiant even in captivity. Sarah's chest tightened. She'd grown up in a small Georgia town, raised on sermons that called people like Elena an abomination. She joined the force to escape that world, to prove she could be something more than her father's daughter. But the lessons of her childhood were stubborn, and they whispered to her now, telling her to keep her distance, to do her job, to ignore the way Elena's voice had cut through her defenses. Coleman. The sergeant's voice snapped her out of her thoughts. You got that report done? Not yet, sir, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I'm double-checking the details. The sergeant grunted and walked away, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. She stood, her boots echoing on the linoleum floor, and approached the holding cell. Elena looked up, her brown eyes sharp and unyielding. Having second thoughts? Elena asked, her tone teasing but edged with challenge. Sarah crossed her arms, leaning against the bars. You made a scene out there. You knew what you were doing. Elena stood, closing the distance between them, the bars the only thing separating them. I was celebrating a win. You're the one who turned it into a scene. Sarah's jaw clenched. You don't get it, do you? You can't just push people like that. Not everyone's ready for your revolution. Elena's laugh was sharp, almost musical. Ready? Sarah, I've been out since I was a teenager. I've had bottles thrown at me, been spit on, been disowned. I don't wait for people to be ready. I live. The words hit Sarah like a punch. She wanted to argue, to say something about order, about protocol, but Elena's intensity was disarming. She was so sure of herself, so unapologetic, and Sarah envied that certainty. She'd spent her life hiding, burying her own questions, her own fleeting attractions, because admitting them would mean dismantling everything she'd built. Why'd you kiss her? Sarah asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Right there, in front of everyone? Elena tilted her head, studying Sarah like she was a puzzle to solve. Because I love her. Because I could. Because for once the law said I had the right. Sarah's throat tightened. She wanted to look away, but Elena's gaze held her. And now you're here, she said softly. Was it worth it? Elena stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Every second. The air between them crackled, and Sarah felt a pull she couldn't name. She stepped back, her heart pounding, and muttered, I'll get your paperwork processed. You'll be out soon. As she walked away, Elena called after her. You didn't answer my question, officer. Why are you doing this? Sarah didn't turn back. She couldn't, because the truth was she didn't know when it entirely. She told herself it was duty, but duty didn't explain the way her hands shook when she thought of Elena's defiance, her passion, her unyielding courage. Duty didn't explain why she'd hesitated before cuffing her, why she'd looked into Elena's eyes and felt something shift inside her. Back at her desk, Sarah pulled up the court ruling on her phone, scanning the details. The ordinance was gone, struck down just hours ago. Her arrest of Elena wasn't just questionable, it was wrong, legally and morally. She'd acted on outdated orders, on her own biases, and now the weight of that mistake pressed down on her. She could release Elena now, claim a mix-up, but that would mean admitting she'd screwed up. And Sarah Coleman didn't screw up. Not in front of her colleagues, not in a station full of cops who already side-eyed her for being a woman in a man's world. She glanced at the holding cell again. Elena was pacing now, her movements restless but graceful, like a caged panther. Sarah's mind flashed to that night in the bar, to the way Elena's laugh had made her feel seen for the first time in years. She'd run from that feeling then, and she wanted to run now, but something kept her rooted. Elena wasn't just a troublemaker. She was a force, a woman who'd fought for her place in a world that didn't always want her. And Sarah, whether she admitted it or not, was drawn to that fire. She just didn't know what to do with it yet. The station's clock ticked past midnight, and Elena was still in the holding cell, her patience fraying like an old rope. She'd called Mia, who was furious but safe, promising to rally their friends and get a lawyer down to the station. But Elena's mind wasn't on Mia or the lawyer, it was on Sarah, who hadn't returned since their tense exchange. Elena replayed the officer's words, her hesitations, the way her eyes had softened for a split second before hardening again. There was something there, something Elena couldn't let go of. Sarah, meanwhile, was in the break room, staring at a cold cup of coffee. The arrest report sat unfinished on her desk, a silent accusation. She'd read the court ruling 3 times now, each word hammering home her mistake. The ordinance was dead, and Elena's kiss, her so-called disturbance, wasn't a crime. Sarah had acted on instinct, on the echo of her training, on the prejudices she hadn't fully shaken. And now she was stuck. Releasing Elena without filing the report would raise questions, but filing it would mean doubling down on a lie. She stood, her boots heavy as she walked back to the holding cell. Elena was sitting again, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "You're still here," Sarah said, her voice quieter than she intended. Elena raised an eyebrow. "You're the one with the keys, officer." Sarah unlocked the cell door, her movements deliberate. "Come with me. We need to talk." Elena followed, wary but curious, as Sarah led her to a small interview room. The space was stark gray walls, a metal table, 2 chairs, but it felt intimate, like a confession was inevitable. Sarah closed the door, her back to Elena for a moment, gathering herself. "I messed up," Sarah said finally, turning to face her. "The ordinance. It's gone. I shouldn't have arrested you." Elena leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing. "So why am I still here?" Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "Because I don't know how to fix this without admitting I was wrong. And in this place." She gestured vaguely at the station. "That's not easy." Elena studied her, seeing the cracks in Sarah's armor, the way her shoulders slumped, the way her voice wavered. "You're scared," Elena said, not accusingly but with a kind of understanding that made Sarah flinch. "Not of me, but of what this means. Of what you might have to face if you admit you're wrong." Sarah's laugh was bitter. "You don't know me." "Don't I?" Elena leaned forward, her voice soft but piercing. "I've seen that look before, Sarah. The one you're trying so hard to hide. You're fighting something, and it's not just this arrest." Sarah's breath caught. She wanted to deny it, to snap back with something sharp, but Elena's words were a mirror, reflecting truths she'd buried for years. Growing up, she'd been taught to fear her own heart, to see love as a battlefield where only certain kinds were allowed. She joined the force to prove she was strong, disciplined, above temptation. But Elena was temptation incarnate, not because of her beauty or her defiance, but because she lived so fiercely, so unapologetically. "I'm letting you go," Sarah said abruptly, standing. "No charges. I'll figure out how to handle the paperwork." Elena didn't move. "That's it? You dragged me here, cuffed me, and now it's just over." Sarah met her gaze, her voice low. "What do you want from me, Elena?" The question hung between them, heavy with possibility. Elena stood, closing the distance until they were inches apart. "I want you to be honest. With me. With yourself." Sarah's heart pounded, her pulse loud in her ears. She could smell Elena's faint perfume, could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. For a moment, she imagined reaching out, touching her, letting the walls she'd built crumble. But the weight of her badge, her past, her fierce was too much. "I can't," Sarah whispered, stepping back. "Not now." Elena's expression softened, but there was steel in her voice. "Then you're going to have to live with that." Sarah opened the door, gesturing for Elena to leave. As Elena walked out, she paused, looking back. "You know where to find me, Sarah. When you're ready." The words lingered long after Elena was gone, echoing in Sarah's mind as she returned to her desk. She tore up the arrest report, her hands shaking, and told herself it was just about fixing a mistake. But deep down she knew it was more. Elena had seen her, truly seen her, and that terrified her as much as it thrilled her. Elena stepped into the cool night air, the city's pulse thrumming around her. Mia was waiting outside the station, her face a mix of relief and fury as she pulled Elena into a tight embrace. "You okay?" Mia asked, her voice muffled against Elena's shoulder. "I'm fine," Elena said, but her mind was still in that interview room, replaying Sarah's whispered "I can't." She kissed Mia's forehead, trying to ground herself, but the weight of the night clung to her. She'd won the case, walked free from the arrest, but something about Sarah's conflict felt unfinished, like a story with no ending. Back at the station, Sarah sat in her patrol car, the engine off, the silence deafening. She'd let Elena go, shredded the report, told her sergeant it was a misunderstanding. But the truth was she was unraveling. Elena's words, "Be honest with yourself," had cracked something open, and now memories flooded in. Stolen glances at women in college, a kiss she'd never admitted to, the shame her father's voice had etched into her bones. She gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, and made a decision. The next morning, Elena was at her law firm, buried in case files, when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the bar tonight. 8 p.m. Sarah." Elena stared at the message, her heart skipping. She should have deleted it. Should have focused on Mia, on her work, on the life she'd fought for. But curiosity, or maybe something deeper, pulled her in. The bar was quieter than the last time they'd met there, the jukebox humming softly in the corner. Sarah was already there, out of uniform, her blonde hair loose, her hands wrapped around a glass of whiskey. She looked up as Elena approached, her expression a mix of resolve and fear. "You came," Sarah said, her voice barely above the music. Elena slid into the booth across from her. "You asked." They sat in silence for a moment, the air thick with unspoken words. Finally Sarah spoke, her voice raw. "I grew up in a place that told me who I could be, who I could love. I thought I could outrun it, but you make me question everything." Elena's breath caught. She leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "You don't have to run anymore, Sarah. You can choose." Sarah's eyes glistened and she looked away, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "It's not that simple. My job, my family, they expect me to be someone I'm not." "Then be someone else," Elena said, her voice fierce. "Be you." Sarah laughed, a broken sound. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not," Elena admitted. "But it's worth it." They talked for hours, the bar emptying around them. Sarah told Elena about her childhood, about the church that shaped her, about the fear that kept her in line. Elena listened, sharing her own story, soft coming out, of losing her family, of finding Mia and the community that became her home. With every word, the distance between them shrank, until their hands brushed on the table, a spark igniting. "I arrested you," Sarah said suddenly, her voice heavy with guilt. "I put you in cuffs for being who you are." Elena's hand covered Sarah's, warm and steady. "You let me go. That's what matters." Sarah looked at their joined hands, her heart racing. She wanted to pull away, to run again, but Elena's touch anchored her. For the first time, she let herself imagine a life where she didn't hide, where she could love without fear. It was terrifying, exhilarating, impossible. "I don't know how to do this," Sarah admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Elena smiled, soft and sure. "You start by being honest. One step at a time." As they left the bar, the night air cool against their skin, Sarah felt lighter, like she'd shed a weight she hadn't known she was carrying. She walked Elena to her car, their shoulders brushing, and for a moment she thought about kissing her. But she didn't, not yet. Instead she said, "I'll see you again." Elena's eyes sparkled under the streetlights. You know where to find me. Weeks passed and Elena threw herself into her work, her relationship with Mia, her fight for justice. But Sarah was never far from her thoughts. They met again: coffee shops, late-night walks, quiet moments stolen from their chaotic lives. Each encounter peeled back another layer of Sarah's defenses, revealing a woman who was brave, flawed, and searching for a truth she denied for too long. Sarah, meanwhile, was changing. She started questioning orders at the station, challenging colleagues who threw around slurs like they were nothing. She read about the history of the laws she enforced, about the people they'd hurt. And she thought of Elena, her courage, her fire, the way she lived without apology. It was Elena who made Sarah want to be better, to be braver. One evening at a rally for queer rights, Sarah showed up, not in uniform but in jeans and a jacket, her presence a quiet rebellion. Elena was speaking on a makeshift stage, her voice ringing out over the crowd, calling for love, for freedom, for change. Sarah watched, her heart swelling, and when Elena stepped down, their eyes met. You're here, Elena said, her smile wide and genuine. Sarah nodded, her throat tight. I'm trying. They walked through the crowd, the energy of the rally buzzing around them. Elena's hand brushed Sarah's, and this time Sarah didn't pull away. They stopped under a streetlight, the world fading to just the two of them. I told Mia, Elena said quietly. About us. About whatever this is. Sarah's heart sank. And she's hurt, Elena admitted. But she wants me to be happy. And you make me happy, Sarah. Sarah's breath hitched. She'd spent her life running from this, from herself, but standing here with Elena, she felt free. You make me happy too, she said, her voice trembling. I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to figure it out. With you. Elena's eyes softened, and she stepped closer, her hand cupping Sarah's cheek. Then let's figure it out together. Their kiss was soft, tentative, a promise of something new. The crowd around them cheered. Not for them but for the cause they were all fighting for. And it felt like the universe was celebrating too. Sarah pulled back, her eyes shining, and for the first time she didn't feel ashamed. Months later, Sarah stood before her sergeant, her resignation letter in hand. She decided to leave the force, to find a path that didn't require her to hide. It wasn't easy, her colleagues whispered, her family cut ties, but Elena was there, her anchor, her reason to keep going. They moved in together, a small apartment filled with laughter and late-night talks, a space where they could both be themselves. The arrest that started it all became a story they told with a mix of pain and pride. Sarah had broken her own law, but in doing so, she'd found her truth. And Elena, who'd fought for love her whole life, had found it in the most unexpected place. Their love wasn't perfect, but it was real. And it was there's a testament to the power of honesty, courage, and the human heart's capacity to change. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.